Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. And welcome to this band of brothers. Remi is a virtuoso cinematographer who needs no introduction, and it's an honor for us to celebrate this incredible work on this historic filmmaking 25 years after its release with its crew. Operator Alan Stewart, BSc. And we've got focus pullers Ben Wilson and Ben Cozens. Sorry, I'm a little nervous, Dave. Forgive me. I'd also like to say, in honor of Martin Kenzie, who is also an operator, who we've sadly lost, was another member of the crew. Personally, Remi has been a huge influence on me throughout his incredible career. And the stunning cinematography aside, it's his chameleon approach to filmmaking and his diverse approach to storytelling that truly makes him stand out as a maestro. And it's also his collaboration with such A-list directors. One of my kind of points of admiration with Remi is also his very calm and collected demeanor. He's such a scholar and a gentleman, and I want to be like him when I grow up, basically. But let's start off with maybe a question of how you all got involved in the project. And Remi, maybe you could start and then tell us a little bit how you met the rest of your crew and invited them.
Right. The thing that I did previously to Band of Brothers was Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, with Shaker Kapoor. And Mary Richards was the line producer on that. And she went on to be the line producer on this. In fact, one of the producers on this. And she invited me to do it. She's an amazing collaborator. She's very clever in as much as some producers allow one department to run away with all the money, so you have amazing sets that you can't afford to light. You probably come across that. But Mary always tried to make sure that every department had the money that they needed to get the show made as well as possible. Anyhow, she invited me onto it. And Martin Kenzie, who's a fantastic operator, he was known to Mary, and she invited him on board. And we invited Alan and Dave and Ben that I've worked with previously many times. I think I was doing the grading of Elizabeth when it started off. So Martin did a lot of research looking at films like World War II in color. And he just to look at how it was photographed. And the whole premise of this series was that it was as if you dropped a modern film crew into World War II and they were making a documentary about it. We didn't want to glamorize war. We didn't want to use slow motion. We didn't want to use too many crane shots, though this episode started and ended with a crane shot, but they weren't self-congratulatory. They weren't showy. In fact, the first shot, I'm totally diverging from your question, was starting on a crane, and Alan was on Steadicam, and as you saw, when it came down to ground, he stepped off it and walked forwards into telling the story. And then the final shot, again, was a crane that came up and saw the building that they were staying in being bombed. So what were you asking me? You were asking me how we got together.
How you all met, really, and formed your team.
Over the years, we just got to know each other, and I always like to work with a team where I don't tell people what to do, but we collaborate more, and we have a more open relationship. Not to say that they would override me, but they might put up a very good persuasion to do something in a different way. Martin Kenzie, an astounding operator, very experienced. Shortly after that, he soon became a cinematographer and worked on Game of Thrones for many, many episodes. But as I say, he did lots of research into the look and the way the cameras moved at that time, and how wartime photography actually happened. And then when I joined it, the team was sort of getting together. We decided on using Moviecam SLs, which was, they don't exist really now. They're not manufactured now because Arri bought Moviecam out a few years before, and they used that mechanism into making the Arri SL camera. So, but that was a lightweight camera, so you could run with that camera and you could jump into trenches and you could crawl along. It was lighter to use on Steadicam. And the other camera, the main camera for more dialogue scenes, was the 535B. I've run out of things to say about that.
Well, one of the things that's definitely there is it's both poetic and brutal at the same time. And you get glimpses of humanity and cruelty, so intertwined, but it's very sensitive to that. And I think it's also in the way it's blocked and then operated. You really are immersed in that. And you really feel both kind of tenderness at certain moments and the erraticness of it. How was a typical day to come to those conclusions? And, was it rehearsed? Was it talked about? How did you find all those subtle nuances?
Well, this is episode 8, and it was made towards the end of the shoot. So the soldiers all knew each other. The actors knew each other. We knew them. Everyone knew their characteristics, yet new people were injected. So, for instance, Jones, who was Tom Hanks's son, was the new boy from West Point, and he wasn't much liked by the team. And in fact, the actors didn't much like him at the beginning because they thought, hang on, he's the producer's son. What's he doing here? Can he act? He actually proved himself as a great actor. So, they respected him as an actor as time went by. And then there was Webster, who was with the team, but he got wounded, and he spent, in their eyes, too long in hospital. So when he came back, as you saw, he was rejected by the team, but then he proved his worth. Anything to say?
So was that all, though, you would watch in the morning and actually figure that out? All those nuances really were really what I was just... I mean, I'd like to say one other thing. Sometimes in a schedule which is like this, which is probably quite quick, it's a monumental scale of detail and work. And I'm sure you had to do it very quickly, but I was, while we were watching just now, I remembered a quote that someone saw a Picasso sketch, and they said, you only did it in 5 minutes, but it took a lifetime to master. And I certainly see it in all your work here. You probably had to work very quickly, but that is a lot of skill, a lot of experience, and I think it could easily be taken for granted. But I think it would be great for the audience to see a little bit of an insight into how a day like that panned out from all of you.
It's funny, try to remember back.
Well, in between each episode, we had a few days with the new upcoming director because it wasn't all directed by one person. So there was a period where the director, the DP, and the designer went around the sets, looked through the scripts, worked out how they're going to do things. And I think if any director knew more about it than any other director, it was Tony Todd, because he was in charge of everything. So he knew all of the characters. He wanted to make it cinematic, so you might notice that there's always depth in the backgrounds, even when you're in a room. And that basement was an actual set. Everything that you see in that show was a real building. When I say a real building, it was not CGI. It was constructed by Tony Pratt and his art department. Everything there was built at Hatfield, every single building. But he knew about where we were going with the stories. And we wanted to try and make it cinematic and not too static, yet we wanted to show the futility of war. That was the main thing, the pointlessness of it. And that's why at the very end of it, Winters did what he did. He said, we're going to fake that we went on that patrol. But So Tony and I went round all the buildings, and at the same time, Tony Pratt was having to build the sets because the whole series was all shot at Hatfield, except for one episode, the last episode that went to Switzerland. And you went there, didn't you?
We did, yeah.
So Tony and I and Tony Pratt, Tony Toe and I went around the sets, working around, and then we went to his office and we spoke about different things and the keenness of each character. And there's one thing that I did, I don't know if you noticed, but Sergeant Jones, his character, Captain Jones, Tom Hanks' son, Colin Hanks, if you noticed, all of his shots, he was flatly lit to make him look innocent. There was more flat light on his face than anyone else because he'd just come fresh out of West Point. He was a new kid and he hadn't seen combat. That's why he wanted to go on the last patrol. And all of his shots had flatter light than any of the other characters. But we spoke about notions like this because on the day, you don't have enough time to do that. So every morning before we shot, Tony Toe, the director, and I would walk around, look at the pages that we're doing that day, and work around the best angles. And the one thing that we didn't have to add was the water and the mud on the ground, because it was the wettest year in history. So all that water you saw, the mud, was real. Do you remember?
Remi, were they actually composite sets? You could go from one building to another, or were they all in? Wow.
Yeah.
So all those night scenes had to be lit from one building to another. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And Jimmy Wilson designed a great, gigantic, we called it a jumbo light, which was about 30 feet, a circular cylinder that was supported on a crane. Back in those days, 25 years ago, we didn't have any LED lights. We had Kinoflows that aren't very bright, so that was filled with 2K blondes so that we could dim some of them down, so that we could change the brightness as the camera moved around. But that created an even gentle light for the attack going across the river and the attack on the German building.
Certainly, when you were talking about the sets, the main sort of town set, which isn't all just reflected in episode 8, but was very cleverly designed by Anthony, wasn't it? With he sort of designed it so that if you approach from one direction, it would be France, and then the other wall, so you approach from another side, would be Germany. So very clever use of just basically two sets out of the one, effectively.
But it was even more complicated because he had to design it so that you could see it in many cases as a virgin building, then under attack, bits falling off, and then devastated. So each town had to have sometimes 3 different characteristics.
And I'm imagining that's pretty much all in camera, all those effects of snow and depth and wow.
And all the bangs.
All the bangs. The bangs,
very much so, yeah.
The muzzle, all the bangs were real because back then you could have blanks in the machine guns, and they're incredibly loud. But what we had to do was because the film shutter would miss some of the flashes, so they had to add the muzzle flash in post. And then you might have noticed tracer flares going across on the wider shots. And those, of course, were done digitally in post.
Was there, in prep from the camera team, any special modifications to cameras that you did, knowing that you had to do such a varied kind of... Did you change the cameras for handheld to Steadicam?
I think trying to make them as light as possible. Really. I mean, there's less equipment on, they didn't have cine tapes.
We didn't have any focusing aids or anything like that. It was no cine tapes or RTs or light rangers. It was pretty scaled down.
Yeah, and we were just saying to Dave earlier that I think it's the first time that I think I actually had a monitor on a camera.
Oh, wow.
But that was just for timings, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So you knew when things were coming in.
I also encouraged Martin, and I'm pretty sure you, to have on board liquid crystal monitors so that when you're running, not in this episode, but when you're running down trenches in more active battle scenes, you don't have to have your eye to the eyepiece, but you can look at, so you can see where you're putting your feet and use that.
That's right. I mean, a lot of the operating, not anywhere near your shoulder. We just had a little 5-inch monitor on top of the map box, and that was just for framing up.
And I imagine this is before easy rigs or any kind of help that really was in your hand.
Yeah, I hate easy rigs. I think they're the worst thing that you can imagine, because the eyeball doesn't ever do that, and you do a pan with an easy rig, and I just hate them. I'm glad I said that.
Also, I feel that certainly for Martin and Alan, that even if they did have some sort of aid to help with the handheld camera, that they'd all be trying to do something so awkward by the being crouched down, then need to be up, then need to be down, then need to be somewhere else. So there was you just had to do it best you could, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
It's incredible how that translates to the audience as being so immersive. Awkward for you and so immersive for the audience. And it didn't feel at all like in any way that the shots were thrown together, that is what you shot. I don't know how much coverage you had, but for me it's that balance of absolute thoughtfulness to effortlessness. And I cannot kind of convey how much I think that's true mastery of the craft.
I think also the simplicity of the systems we were using. I think that a lot of the systems that have evolved, digital systems, have become incredibly complex and time-consuming. Whereas I suppose we were stripped down and simplified, so it just seemed as though you could move much quicker.
Yeah.
Don't ever remember Video Village and blah, 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 all the trimmings that seem to have to be moved just about every time you turn around. So it seemed easier.
I don't remember. We didn't have a Video Village, did we?
I don't remember one.
We had one. We had one.
Probably a monitor.
We had one guy who recorded it.
That's right. Kevin Bruton. So, yeah.
I remember that.
But we didn't have enough time to go and review and say, oh, that was good, let's do it again. We didn't have time for that thing.
I think we all just stayed close to each other, didn't we? The directors would be close to us, Remi would be right next to us, so we'd all be, and the actors, of course, and also, as we've seen, as shown there, and in most of the episodes, the lenses aren't long, so we're physically so close to the actors at all times. So the spaces aren't big we're working in, certainly in other episodes when you're in trenches, etc., you're on top of each other, you really are working on top of each other. But so that sort of communication is immediately there because we're all literally squashed in, weren't we? Getting muddy.
In the wet.
Yeah. And did you choose lenses for close focus in that regard as well, or was it mainly for clarity, and
also lightweightness? Lightweight, is that a word? For the lightness of the weight of the lens, we knew that there was going to be a lot of hand holding, and we didn't want really very heavy lenses because we wanted the ability to get the best pan. You can do a handheld shot with a very heavy lens, but you're not likely to want to do it a lot of times. But we wanted clean lenses, so we used Zeiss Master Prime, Ultra Primes. Yeah. And they were lightweight, they had a good wide aperture. Back then, the world wasn't so obsessed with incredibly shallow focus, though you could do shallow focus if you wanted to. For example, the shot where before the patrol, the guy was dead on the ground, and the background was very soft in the background, and until you pulled to Michael Fassbender, who was very sad to see his friend being killed. But back then, we weren't so obsessed with very, very shallow focus. So we chose lenses for practicality, so we chose that series. We also had Ingenue Optimo zooms. And mostly we used the mid-range. We didn't go for the really wide angle like Polanski might have, but medium telephoto lengths. Of course, we did deviate occasionally.
And your lighting was set up apart from your objectives, in terms of creative objectives. Was there? It seems like there was a practical objective of trying to keep all these actors in one shot and keep this style of filmmaking going. Was there a? I know you've mentioned your rig for your night scenes, but were there practicals rigged? Did that have to kind of work in the pre-production stage? Was I'm imagining it's 93 stock at the time, or it's 2000. I can't imagine it went up a bit above
We did
200
have
ASA.
halfway through the shoot, we got 800 ASA.
5278 was it? Or
89 was the.
It was 400. It was the 400
about
ASA stock, wasn't it?
around that
Was it
time.
400?
We used 5274, which is 200 ASA.
200.
Vision 500T, which is 5279,
That's it.
and Vision 800T,
That's the 89.
which is the 89.
Yeah. Wow.
But that, I think, we only got halfway through the shoot because they'd only just created it. So as soon as they made it, we started using it. But the hardest thing for lighting was the basement, where most of the action happened, because that was a set built at the bottom of the normal, the building where you saw them up at the top. So that was a set that, as you saw, had arched ceiling, but it was in shot most of the time, so there wasn't any depth to light from. In daylight, you could push it in from outside, which is what I would like to do anyway, but at nighttime, we had to hide Kino flows and little reefer lights, and that's where I tried to break down the directness of the light by using black lace. I have a habit of using black dyed cotton, mostly lace, that hides the electric look of the light. So it doesn't look like you're shining a light on someone, it just mutes and muffles the light a little bit. But that was really hard because we had some wide shots, we had pans around, and we didn't have time to relight every setup. We had to move really fast. So there were lots of concealed lights and lots of lace hidden on the ceiling to mute the electric look of the light.
And did you watch dailies projected or at all?
There wasn't time for that. We got little high-8 tapes, both Joel Ransom, who was the other unit cinematographer, and we both got each other's dailies so we could keep up to date with what each other's doing, and I kept noticing he's got more crane shots than me. But yes, we saw them at home on high-8s in our own time, yeah.
And I know we briefly touched on it, but would you like to talk a little bit about your thoughts on the grading and the color correction? I know you had some.
Yeah. Tony Toe is a wonderful producer and a very creative person. Somewhere along the line, the original idea where we had shot tests and had them graded, where each episode had a slightly different look. So clearly, if you're doing episode 5 or 6, 6 or 7, which is in the snow,
The stage.
which was shot in the Comet hangar, the stage has a different look to this episode, say. But it was much more exaggerated when we did the tests. And towards the end, episode 9, which is where they found the concentration camp, my idea was to have it more like a Bertolucci film, and it was more golden until they got to the horror of the concentration camp, where suddenly it became drained. And in that episode, we shot at 27 frames a second to slow it down. And at that speed, you can pull the sync back to normal and change the pitch. So it's still sync, but everything is slightly numbed. It's slowed down. But you don't realize it. You get a number sensation. Anyhow, we had all these different looks, but then at the end of the day, it was decided it's all got to have an even more, everything's going to be equally desaturated. And I had a big argument about that with my lovely friend Tony, because you have all these characters. Some are Irish with reddish hair, some are Italian. You have so many different looks. You have German uniforms, English uniforms, and the paratroopers, and you can't tell the difference because it's so desaturated. Here, I don't think there was a problem, because by this time you got to know everyone, but it's also why I had to put a little bit more light onto the faces so that you could see them. Another thing of the series was no slow motion, not too many crane shots, and not too much heavy backlight. We didn't want to romanticize war. We didn't want to make it look attractive, like you want to jump in and be part of the action.
Well, I was going to also ask each of you what your kind of most treasured moment on this series was, or something that you've taken away forever and maybe helped you on another project or motivated you on another project. Dave, should we start with you?
For me, it was just really meeting these guys and learning my craft. I mean, I was relatively, this was the first big budget job that I'd done, and I couldn't have, wished to have started out with better people. It was a real baptism of fire. It was amazing, and that's what I've sort of taken with me going forward. Just the generosity of these guys that got me involved.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, same as Dave, really. Yeah, I mean, some incredible friendships were made on that film. Some of us already knew each other. Some of us met on that film, or show rather, and those relationships have stayed strong ever since. We've all worked with each other
Many times, yeah.
endless projects. We've all gone away, come back together, gone away, come back together. I mean, certainly for me, I had been with Remi for quite a while prior. Each role I started as a camera trainee, and then Remi made me to loader, went away, did other things, came back. Eventually Remi made me up to focus puller, went off, did other projects, then came back. Remi made me up to an operator.
Me before you.
Yeah, so nearly all my moments of progressing have always been connected to Remi. But yeah, the whole of that year was an incredible year. It was an exhausting year, without a doubt, exhausting. But everybody was valued, people felt valued. I don't remember, at any point we just come along and get on with it. And it was a really fantastic job.
It was, I mean, I remember that year of people, if they did a day's work, it was a real highlight of their year. Even for people doing Daly's work, it was such an honor to work on that production. It was such a talked about production.
I think the thing that I took away most, especially from this episode, was that I had enough of doing Steadicam. I used to go home every night with sore feet. Anyway, seeing it again, I kind of forgot just how much stuff was in it. It's an incredible piece of work, incredibly proud to have worked on it. You travel all round, and when people find out that you'd actually been involved in it, it's quite something. Whereas I suppose when we were doing it, it was just like, well, a job to a certain extent, You never knew that it was going to be as successful as it is.
Well, watching it on a big screen, it's so worthy of a big screen, and that shows the commitment to kind of detail and the dedication.
We did have an astounding team. I mean, we had Josh Williams was in charge of special effects, and all the big explosions, the houses blowing up, that was for real. That wasn't CGI. That was for real. Yeah. And in other episodes, there's even more. We had astounding armorer. Some of the rounds you saw here, the big gun, when they were defending our troops, the American troops, sorry, not our troops, the American troops coming back over the river, those cost £5 a bang. And it was going bang, 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 bang. And I'm thinking, hang on, I should be being paid more if they got this much money. We had astounding costume department, thousands of costumes, all looking black and white. We did have an amazing team. We've got Rene, my son, who also worked on it, and Ian Struthers.
Mr. Struthers.
Ian Struthers, where's Ian? Ian, right, yeah, who also worked on it. We had a great grip, John Arnold, who was our key grip.
And a Scottish grip.
Stewart Bunting, who was up with us too, yeah.
And an amazing loader with us, who's no longer with us.
John Adefarasin.
John, yeah, another son of mine who was a loader, a film loader. Yeah,
Happy times.
happy times.
Very happy.
But it wasn't on the day, was it? Every day was exhausting. It was wet. It was, honestly, it was the wettest year in history. And it was also the year where we had the petrol crisis, where we had to queue up behind 30 cars just to get to work, to drive to Hatfield.
Also, I remember at the end of the day, the special effects guys would set up their jet sprays.
We'd hosed each other
And
down.
you could everybody would literally hose you down in your wet weather gear because it was easier than getting in the car because you were so caked in mud. I mean, you really were well and truly soggy and dirty.
Yeah.
Well, you certainly feel it when you watch the film. Do you think we should ask some questions to the audience? Gentlemen, shall we pass the microphone, please?
Thank you very much. Maestri, congratulations to this band of brothers for that band of brothers. Now the question, is the art and science of cinematography undervalued? I say this because there was an article in the Times newspaper the other day by the chief film critic, no less, and he didn't mention, in the reporting on the Oscars, he didn't mention cinematography at all, and indeed, in the list of categories, guess which category came last? So something maybe should be done.
That's a burning question, isn't it? I think directors, producers, actors know about the value of cinematography, but when it comes to marketing a film, they'd rather talk about maybe a director and the actors.
With stupid media,
Yeah. I mean, I think the times are changing with films. If you look at, I mean, my wife and I love old films. And old films are so much better thought out. They're planned, they're not accidental, they're not put together in the cutting room. You don't shoot everything that moves on 3 different sizes, then move around here, shoot it 4 ways, then do a reverse, then do that. They just think about, and I didn't finish saying how Tony Toe and I planned the day. We'd look at each scene and we'd block it with the actors, as we always do on movies, and we'd work out, okay, do we need to see this? Do we need to see that? Do we need to cut to that person's face when they say one line at a table? Sometimes it's more powerful to see them from behind. So I think cinematography isn't undervalued by those that know what good films are. Thank you.
Lady in the back.
Well, talking about planning, I would really love to hear that whole night sequence when they're, going along the water. Like how long that took to shoot, and what went into planning that. How many days, kind of thing, and how do you plan such a wonderful sequence?
Shall I have a go? Yeah. The idea was, if I seem to remember correctly, that Tony said that he wanted to be able to shoot it all in one shot. And from the moment they crossed the river, the wire was cut. We did one continuous Steadicam shot all the way to the house. The grenades went in, and that was all shot in one continuous shot. We planned out the moves. I think we had some free time after work one day, and we plotted out the route, and we worked out where the cast would kind of do the exchanges. There was various holes filled in so that I could move with the Steadicam rig quite easily. But the idea being, and Remi touched on it earlier, the lighting for that night work was almost like a large light bulb over the set so we could shoot in any direction. But yeah, what was your question?
We also had searchlights in the background. They were real, and they cost an awful lot of money to hire. They were brutes, but we had 2 of them. They're very, very expensive to hire. But they weren't adding to the lighting. They were just a background effect.
Just to add to that, so you developed the shot from that single shot, though, and did that happen kind of naturally as the scene kind of moved along?
Part of your question, I think, was how long did it take? And obviously, it's a night shoot, and I think we shot the initial shot quite quickly. And it was like, oh, what are we going to do for the rest of the night then? But then Tony kind of cut into the Steadicam shot when they all got down behind the log pile, and we started doing more kind of conventional shots to cut in with the Steadicam shot. I felt a bit put out because it was like, oh, hold on. We'd done quite a nice shot, and now it's been chopped to bits.
They always cut into
anyway,
Steadicam shots.
That was the way of it.
Thank you very much for your work, first of all. I wanted to ask, when I was told about Band of Brothers, it was initially sold to me as a watcher as the successor of Saving Private Ryan. And I remember watching the first episode and thinking, yes, the production, yes, everything, but it does look like it's the same universe, except we're with another group now. So my question is, was there any directive from production to make it look at all similar? Did you use it as reference or nothing like that?
The only, as far as I'm concerned, having lost my Oscar to Saving Private Ryan, was that I didn't want it to be the baby daughter of Saving Private Ryan. So we went for it in our way, and we did our thing. And that's one of the reasons I got quite annoyed at the end, where the grading of it went towards the bleach bypass look with the heightened blacks and the massive desaturation, because I felt I didn't want it to be Saving Private Ryan again, but also I wanted to tell the difference between all the different soldiers, the characters, because I like telling stories about people rather than action. That's why I thought this was a good episode, because you can't, when all the banging happened, you don't actually look at the photography because it's so frantically cut. We had a brilliant editor, Frances Parker, and she cut it very, very well. But you don't look at the photography or the art behind it. You just get lots of different shots and you cut them together and tell the story.
It's a far more intimate story and a far more, it's a deeper delve into the human condition than Saving Private Ryan was. And you did it such justice in that regard.
This is being recorded.
It's my opinion, my humble opinion.
Well, certainly as well, Remi would often talk about if you get various characters, for instance, your Band of Brothers, that Remi's often interested in. So if the story's about you, he would be more interested in the other people around you, as opposed to focusing on that person, focus on their friends, and you learn more about the character you might be focusing on by actually observing the other characters. So often the coverage that we did wasn't, it was often quite loose. It allowed you to see lots of characters at the same time, so you can read a few faces in the same shot. And your attention, but that sort of key of learning about somebody via their friends. And that sort of very much sort of occurs throughout all of Band of Brothers, of the way of seeing people.
It never felt repetitious. It never felt forced. It really felt just. And I always felt, looking at that you couldn't move the camera an inch to the left or the right of where it was. It seemed to be just in the right spot all the time, as well. And again, that's another thing. It might take 5 minutes to set up. It takes a lifetime to master. Do we have another question?
just wanted to ask about the beautiful montage sequence that's in the middle with the portraits of all the soldiers before they go off on the night mission. Do you have any memories of shooting that? And it tells so much about each
Preparing
individual
their
characters.
Sitting,
it's so subtle as
sitting
well.
down the sights and taking their rings off and that, yeah. Montage is always questionable, and that was one of the very few times in this episode where we had music. It was mostly devoid of music, this episode, and that was intentional, because, you know, I've said that the whole idea of it was not to glamorize war, and to show the horror of it. And this episode was starting to show just how horrible war is and the futility of it, the stupidity of it. And then the next episode is where we saw the concentration camp. And, you know, that really drives it home how horrible war is. Sorry, what did you say? What was the question?
Just any memories of shooting that sequence, because it's beautifully done.
Oh, the montage, yes. Well, montages, they're not normally directed to say, just do me a few shots that pick together. But Tony pointed out what kind of things we knew. We wanted to get some movements so we could cut from one angle to another. We didn't know that the amazing Michael Kamen composed the score, which was astounding. He didn't get any nominations for the score at all, nothing. An astounding score, but he did this very gentle, quiet little melody for that montage, which of course binds the montage together. And we wanted the quiet before the chaos.
That's why it works so well.
Did you have a question?
Oh, no. I was just curious, if you were to film that today digitally, what your different approach might be. That works so well on film.
That's a good question.
A camera's a light-type box, basically. Yeah, a camera's a light-type box with a lens on it. So I wouldn't use anything too clever within the camera. Today you can shoot with incredibly high speed ASAs or ISOs, whatever you call it. So I could shoot all of you without any additional lights, except you're all top lit, so you're ugly. So, you know, when we go to close-ups, I'd have to put a little bit of fill light or a little P light on the camera just to get your eyes. But cameras can shoot with very, very little light. So that night scene where they went over the river, it would be much more achievable and would look much more realistic. Of course, these days you have astounding post-work in the DI suite. So a nightmare for any cinematographer doing a snow scene is the snow gets all the light, it is too white, and the characters don't get any light. So these days you can change the brightness of the snow by making it duller, so you can actually see the actors' faces a bit more. But digitally, I think, no, I just approach it in a very similar way. Nowadays, we have astounding focus assistants where you can get focus, you know that it's in focus without doubting it. Back then, these guys, if we played it back, we couldn't tell whether it's sharp or not. So we wouldn't know until the next day or two whether it was in focus or not. So we really heavily depended on them. So when Dave, who mostly said, Remi, I'm not sure about that, and said, can we go again? I'd trust him. And he was always right. He was even right the first time when he thought it was soft. But nowadays, you know without any question that it's perfectly sharp. So you have a DIT who can play it back, and you know absolutely that it's sharp. So it gives you, I suppose a digital camera gives you the courage to be braver, because you can play it back and you know you've got it. So you can do a scene very dark or very bright, and the producers, directors know what you're getting. But what that does is remove an element of trust. So everyone is saying, oh, that's a bit too bright, or that's a bit too dark, can we do that? And a lot of the time, these people are sitting with their monitor in front of a bright light, so they're not actually they're not seeing the shot that we're getting. But in the past, directors would trust the cinematographer and the camera team The operators and the focus pullers very much more. And in many ways, you get more friendship and bonding and more unification of the team making the one film. I got esoteric.
That was right.
Another question?
Thank you.
Hey, Remi, can you talk a little bit more about prep and specifically how you might have worked with Joel, the other DP, and coordinated to make the look across the entire miniseries? Were both units shooting at once, or was it one off, one off, one on, one off, and how that coordination might have worked?
Joel is Canadian, and he shot The X-Files, and I was shooting a film in Chicago, and I was doing a night shoot, and it was agreed that we would meet him after I'd wrapped the night shoot in a hotel. So he flew in from Canada or somewhere, and I met him in a hotel, and we had a coffee, and he was talking about style and everything, and after a while I realized I was asleep. And I woke up, and I didn't hear a word of what he said, and I don't recall anything. And I think he was aware that my eyes were shut for a very long time. But we did talk about, the Bible of how we're going to shoot it. We wouldn't do high speed. We didn't want to glorify combat. We didn't want to go in for backlight because that makes it look like a lovely Bertolucci film. And we wanted to be realistic. We didn't want to glorify the soldiers. We wanted to treat them neutrally. So we knew all of that. And our communication was mostly by little high-8 tape that we watched independently in our own homes. But sometimes his unit was shooting night shoots, and my unit was shooting day shoots. And the actors came straight from a night shoot, straight into a day shoot. And that really helped for their weariness. They were genuinely exhausted. They were genuinely exhausted a lot of the time.
Did you communicate during production, or were you just too busy to do that?
Well, quite honestly, we were too busy. But we did see what each other were doing. We saw each other's sets. We saw the lighting setups. We knew what lights each other were using. Back then, there were no LEDs at all. We had 18Ks was a powerful light, the old 18K, and that was the brightest light that we had. And it was all tungsten. Apart from that, it was tungsten lights and a few Kino tubes. I can't remember anything else.
Right?
Yeah. Oh.
I mean, one thing I'd just like to add, again, it's the detail and how with that, in watching just high-8 tapes, this is what astounds me. It's more of an observation of kind of, if it was a viewfinder, and as you said, a small onboard monitor, and then you watch things on high-8, yet the attention to detail, there's not a thing out of place. And I think that has a lot to do with the kind of, in this argument about digital and film, one of the things that you have to rely on as an analog cinematographer is your actual eye and your instinct and your experience. And I think that is something that you definitely see here, especially seeing an episode which was meant for home viewing on a big screen. I would gladly come every week to the cinema and watch an episode a week on a big screen. And it's testament to talent and experience here.
I tell you, there's something that's just occurred to me, is we had two amazing operators. We had Alan and Martin, who sadly has died. But when you shoot on film, you're the first person that's seeing the image, that the operator is. They're seeing it through an eyepiece, and no one else can see that. You can see it on a very poor, low-level video tab, which is looking at the ground glass, so it's not very good quality. All you can tell is the actual shape of the frame and what's in the middle of it. but you can't tell the quality and whether someone's looking at the camera or whether someone's left something bad in the background, a walkie-talkie or something in the background. So when you shoot on film, the operator is very, very responsible for what is going through the gate. Whereas when you're shooting digitally, you know that there's a DIT who's very attentive to the monitor. You know that you have a video village with producers, makeup, costume, blah, 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 girlfriends, looking at it. So you're just pointing the camera. You don't feel that responsible because you know there are 50 pairs of eyes looking at exactly that same image at that same time. But when you're shooting on film, you have to be very, very, very responsible. Yeah.
And I think that's what people should do anyway,
Yeah,
regardless of acquisition.
I've seen the series a few times. It's the first time I've seen it on the big screen. What jumped out to me a little bit is the handheld into the studio work was like seamless. There was no, we're handheld, now we're on a dolly track, which there was quite a lot in that episode. So, yeah, lovely to see.
Well, there's a movement, I think, in modern filmmaking to deliberately bad handheld, where you deliberately shake the camera to make it look like handheld. And that's why you think, directors sometimes think that makes it real. But to me, it just distracts from looking at the image. And the other thing is easy rig, which just never, ever looks like a human point of view. Because you can't do static shots on it because it's always swinging. You can't do movement on it. You don't use it, do you?
No. I would even say that that's a lot to do with the decision-making of when to use handheld and when to use, that it was so correct every time that it doesn't feel like it's ever the wrong choice, and it just felt right every time. And also, I would also probably imagine that on some films, you might get that from the top. That might be from Tony, for example, where if we're doing a handheld film, we've got to do everything. And we've all been there where we said, well, we don't really need it here, and we're not always listened to. It seems here that there was attention paid to that. And it certainly shows, or we wouldn't have these comments.
I just wanted to ask if, the interviews that are shown at the beginning with the veterans, and obviously a lot of it is about their point of view, and if that affected how the decision-making in how to shoot something, as opposed to just reading it on the script.
Can you say that again? The veterans at the beginning.
The veterans at the beginning, obviously, it's their story, it's their point of view from the book to the interviews that they've done. Did their comments on the actual events that you were then shooting, would that change your approach to it, as opposed to just...
Yeah, okay, sorry. That wasn't shot by us. That was shot in America because they were quite old, so that was shot by, obviously on video, a video system, not film. And it was actually Tony who directed this, you call him the showrunner these days. He was with us every day on any episode, so he was flying between the two different units. At lunchtime, he invited us into his trailer and showed us some interviews that they thought might go on a special program at the end of the series, just with all the veterans talking about their experiences. And we said, this is so wonderful. Wouldn't it be great, because we're telling a story about the truth, wouldn't it be great just to have a few comments from them at the very beginning? And that's where the idea of having those little bits at the beginning of each episode. And it was deliberately decided never to mention who those characters were. So those were the real vets. But in the 10 episodes, in the 9 episodes, it was never said who they were. And it's only on the 10th episode, I think, that you saw who each person actually was. Yeah.
So that was not intended to ever be shown at the beginning of an episode?
No, Tony thought it was so powerful. In fact, Martin, Tony and I, were you in there?
No, I can't remember.
Martin Kenzie, Tony and I were in there watching these things. We just thought it would be a great idea to have it at the very beginning.
Was it meant to be research or just...
No, it was intended, my belief is that it was intended to be shown in a special program at the end of the series. Because it was important to get them on tape, because they were getting towards the end of their lives.
It made it more powerful because you knew that at least some survived.
And one day, Garnier, the rural Garnier who had his leg blown off, came to set at Hatfield. And we were in tears because we'd been shooting his life story. And to see the man who was so happy and jokey and cheerful and lively really there, and this was about halfway through, we literally had tears running down our face. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? Well, I'd like to thank you all for kind of being so open about it and sharing this with us. And I think you deserve a great big round of applause.